Hi friends, welcome back to our channel Total QA. In our channel, we posted a lot of videos and categorized into different playlists. Recently, we started with the WebDriver tutorial series, and as part of WebDriver tutorial series, we have completed 2 videos. That is, day 1, we discussed about introduction, variables, DataTypes and examples. And day 1 video is this one. This will be provided in the description of the day 3 video. And day 2 also we have completed, and also the link and also the repository link also available. The examples also posted in the GitHub. If you'd like to practice, please download those programs and practice in your Eclipse as well. In today's topic, that is mainly day 3. In today's topic, we discuss about loops, for loop, nested for loop, enhanced for loop, while and do while. So these topics we will cover today. So let's get into the topic. Today's topic, loops. So what are loops mainly? Loops will help us to perform an activity for specified number of times. Means, let's take an example. Suppose if we would like to print Selenium 10 times. So we should write system.out.println Selenium in different statements. Totally we have to write 10 times. We have to repeat the same step again and again. In order to achieve this, because the same statement we are repeating, so it's a repetitive task. To achieve this repetitive task, we should depend on loops. Now here we have given a syntax for loop. The syntax is for initialization, condition, increment or decrement, and we have to write this repetitive statement in the start and end of this loop within the curly braces. Example, if you can look into this right now, for int I is equal to 0, there is a semicolon, I less than 10, 0 less than 10, and I plus plus. What is I plus plus means? I plus plus means I is equal to I plus 1. Okay, so the value of I is equal to 0, I is equal to 0 plus 1, the I will be 1. So this will execute for the values of I for 0, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So from 0 to 9, totally 10 times, this for loop will execute continuously and print the statement Selenium in the console. So for every repetitive task, it's better to use loops. Let's try to write this example now. So let's go to the example. There are multiple programs available here. There are different placeholders for practicing today's topics. Let's get into the for loop example. I will write a main method here. And in the main method, we will write down, say, like printing statement 10 times. Okay. So we'll write the for loop for int I equal to 0, I less than the conditional statement, mainly the 10 number of times we want to execute the statement, I plus plus. Here inside we will write system.out.println. We can mention here as Selenium. In the place of I plus plus, we can even mention I is equal to I plus 1, both are same. Okay, it doesn't require to mention I plus plus. You can even mention I is equal to I plus 1, and we can print the value of I as well. What is the value of I? The value of I is, let's see, value of I inside the loop. So we know what is the value of I, how many times this value will be ranging from 0 to 9, how many times it will print. Let's see that in the console. Let me execute the program now. Right click, run as Java application. Now we can see the console. The console is printing Selenium, and also the value of I is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is how you can print the values of I also in the for loop to see the value of I ranging from 0 to 9. This is important. Now, next loop in the list, nested for loop. Right now we have seen a for loop. But what is nested for loop? A for loop inside another for loop is called nested for loop. Means we will write one for loop. Within the for loop, we will write another for loop. This is called a nested for loop. What is the use of these nested for loops? In the case of Selenium, suppose for example, if you would like to read the tabular data where there are multiple table rows and each and every table row contains multiple columns, then first thing you have to use one for loop for the table row. To iterate the table rows, one for loop is required. Then within the for loop, you have one for loop for iterating the columns for each and every row. So for especially in the case of tabular data, the for loops, the nested for loops are very helpful. And not only that, whenever we would like to read the data from the XLS or XLSX, where there are rows and columns available, we have to use nested for loop. But we'll see in this class, mainly for day 3, we will focus mainly on for loops without using any Selenium concepts, mainly for a pure Java topics perspective. We just take a very basic example. Okay, let's see. So nested for loop. Let me write a main method. Okay, so now, especially suppose for int I is equal to 0, I less than say 10, I plus plus, we are writing one for loop. Inside the for loop, we will write another for loop. Int j is equal to 0, j less than 10, j plus plus. Then here what happens? We will try to print the value of j. Okay. So what happens? The value will be printed 10 times. For I, which is 0, j 10 times. For I is equal to 1, j 10 times. For I is equal to 2, j 10 times. This is how it will print. But can we do one thing? Can we just print some pattern here? Some pattern. Suppose j less than I. And print j. And see what happens in this case. Let me execute. Run as the application. Okay, it is printing in different format. Let's do one thing. Let me show you some pattern here. When I say print, it prints and doesn't go to the next line. Okay, when I say println, it prints and go to the next line. So what I do is for I is equal to 0, yes, j is equal to 0, j less than 0, it doesn't print anything. For I is equal to 1, j is equal to 0, 0 less than 1, yes, it will print j. So like that it will execute here the conditional statement. I will just put system.out.println. Once it executes, it go to the next line. Let me try to execute this program and see what happens now. You understand now? We're able to print a pattern. Mainly in the case of printing patterns, we can use a nested for loop. First it prints 0, then 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in order to print a pattern, we always need to use a nested for loop. How this executed? Suppose let's take I is equal to 2. Let's take I is equal to 2. When I is equal to 2, what happens? I is equal to 2. Then what happens? J is equal to 0, comma 1. So what happens? 0 less than 2, 1 less than 2. This for loop will execute 2 times until print 0, 1. When I is equal to 2, it will print 0, 1. Suppose I is equal to 3, it prints 0, 1, 2. Why? Because 0 is becoming 0, 1, 2, j less than 3. So it prints 0, 1, 2. So this is how you have to focus on nested for loop. The same will be applicable in the case of tabular data as well. Suppose for example, you are fixing table row as 1. And in the table row of 1, you have multiple table data, say table data of 1, comma, table data of 2, comma, table data of 3. So the same logic is applicable for table as well, where you fix a table row, you iterate all the columns. Okay, so this is how you can print patterns as well in Java using a nested for loop, and you can have multiple examples like this. Suppose if you want to add some space, you can add space like this and try to see how it works. The pattern now. See, this is how the pattern is printing. So like that you can try to write so many examples to print the different patterns in the case of nested for loop, but this will be really helpful for us to understand this concept. Okay, and one more important point, once this for loop is completed, I am adding system.out.println. So what does it mean? Once you print all of them in one line of statement, say 0, 1, 2, in the case of I is equal to 3, we are printing 0, 1, 2 in the same line of statement, then after this for loop, you can add system.out.println, it will go to the next line. Then again, I is equal to 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, it prints in the same line of statement, and system.out.println will go to the next line. So this is how it will execute continuously till the logic is working as expected and the condition is true. Now, let's move on. And how do you break this nested for loops or a loop? Suppose you take a for loop, you want to break. You want to terminate the loop and go back to the next line following the for loop. So how we can achieve this? This can be achieved using a break. In the case of Java, let's try to do that. Suppose let's take a normal for loop. You would like to break this for loop. So what we can do, if I is equal to, we can put a conditional statement. If I is equal to 5, what we can do, we can say break. Or else you don't need to put the curly braces. Why? Because in the case of conditional statement, there is only one statement. It doesn't require to put the curly braces for the if conditional statement. You can say if I is equal to 5, just put break. What happens after that? You can write some statement here, write down the logic as after for loop. So what happens? Once the break is executed successfully, the control goes to the line number 16 after for loop. So break is helpful for us to terminate the conditional statements. Let me execute this right now. Right click, run as Java application. After for loop. So what happens now? Once the conditional statement is true, if I equal to 5 is true, it will break. Then the control goes here and it will execute the line number 16. And we got the output as well. Now, let's get into the next example on how do you break the nested for loop. In the case of nested for loop, it is important we have to use a label. Let me put a label here. The label is suppose for example, we'll put outer for loop here. Then I have to mention if I equal to 3, just mention break outer. So this is how you have to break the nested for loop. Then let me remove the curly braces. If there is only one statement within the conditional statement, there is only one line of statement within the conditional statement, doesn't require to put the curly braces. When I put break outer, what does it mean? It will break from this loop and also it will break from this loop. Totally it will break 2 loops. Then it goes to the next line of statement. We can write here as system.out.println break the nested for loop. This is how it will execute. When I save it, what happens and execute the program? Let's see. Nested for loop. You execute the program. And what happens? 0001 break the nested for loop. When it breaks, when I equal to 3, it breaks the nested for loop. So this is how you can break the nested for loop using a label. This is a label and you can mention break a label. This label you can keep any name. It's not only outer, you can keep any name. Just for understanding, I put outer here and you can put break the label name. So this is how you break the nested for loop. Then next topic is enhanced for loop. This enhanced for loop is mainly implemented in Java 5 and Java version 5, and this enhanced for loop is useful only in specific scenarios. It is not required to use enhanced for loop every time. Only in scenarios where when there is no possibility of retrieving the elements from the collection. Suppose there is a collection called set. If you are trying to retrieve the elements from the set, we cannot use index here. If there is no index, in those scenarios, it is really helpful for us to retrieve the elements from the set using enhanced for loop. The syntax of enhanced for loop is for data type variable name, colon, array name or collection. Okay, so let's see an example. We'll take a set to understand this concept. Let me try to store elements in the set. Say set of strings. Set of strings. You can take hash set mainly. New hash set. To understand this example of enhancer for loop, let's take hash set. Okay, we imported using Control-Shift-O, which is a shortcut in Eclipse to organize the imports. We added these two imports using the shortcut Control-Shift-O. Okay, to organize the imports, what's the shortcut? Control-Shift+O to organize import statements. Okay, now let me add an object. As set.add, let me add say Selenium. Similarly, just add as set.add Java, because these are all string objects. We are declaring, we have declared the set to store the string objects. Let's try to add string objects. Okay, now if we would like to print the values from the set, we don't have any index number. Why? Because if you say set.get, there is no method available in the case of set to use to pass the index to get the value. So in those scenarios, we should depend on enhancer for loop. The enhancer for loop is for each string str stored in hash set. That's it. We are done. We just need to print system.out.println str. For each string str stored in a hash set, retrieve the string and print it within the loop. When I execute this program, let me execute this program, we get an output here as Selenium, Java, C++. All the three values we got, because hash set is not ordered. It will print in a specific, it's unordered mainly, it will print in some order, but hash set doesn't print the values in the order, whatever the order we added. Suppose we added Selenium, Java, C++, we are getting Java, C++, Selenium, we are getting the values, but they are not ordered. Okay, it's not an issue, but the focus is here mainly how are we retrieving the elements from the set using enhancer for loop. So this will be really helpful in this case to retrieve the elements from the collection where there is no index. We should totally depend on enhancer for loop. Now, next topic, while loop. We already have for loop. Then why do we need a while loop in specifically to repeat the steps as per our requirement? The main difference between for loop and while loop is for loop always depends on the conditional statement and it executes based upon the conditional statement till it is successful. But here if you see here while loop, you have a conditional statement while the condition is true. It is not depending on the number of times this loop has to be executed. This is depending on the condition to be successful. Till this condition is successful, while loop will execute. But in the case of for loop, you will execute this loop for specific number of times, say 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. But in the case of while loop, while this condition is true, please execute this. While this condition is true, please execute this statement. Okay, so there's a lot of difference here. For loop executes a number of times, suppose 10 times, 20 times, but while loop will execute based upon the condition. The condition is true, let me execute this. Okay, so let's get into the example now. While loop. Suppose I mention here I is equal to 10 or I is equal to 5. Right? And so while I less than 10. system.out.println, we can even print here in while loop, and I will mention here I equal to I plus 1. So what happens? I is equal to 5, 5 less than 10, true. 6, 7, 8, 9, I less than 10, true. 10 less than 10, it will not execute. The execution of the while loop will stop and doesn't continue further. So what I'll do here also, I'll mention the value of I to understand how many times this has been executed. Value of I within the while loop. Let's see. Run as while loop example. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is how it executes till this condition is true. Suppose for example you are putting here 11. 11 less than 10. Will it execute? Run as application. So you are not getting any output. Let me see the console. The console is not having any output. Why? Because 11 less than 10, it is false. It is not true. It's not returning true. The conditional statement should return true. While true, it goes inside and execute the while loop. This will be really helpful in the case of conditional statements. Till the conditional statement is valid, this will execute further. Okay, now let's move on to the next loop in the list. Is a do while loop. So let's write down the do while loop now. Do while loop has a specific syntax like initialization, say do block of statements, increment or decrement, and you have to write a conditional statement here. Let's write down this do while loop. Okay. So now same example, I is equal to 5, do system.out.println the value of I in do while. Okay, then here while I less than 10. You can see here you have to put a semicolon here. Then let's try to execute. And we have to increment as well. It is very important you have to increment, otherwise this will go for infinite loop. Always make sure we increment it as well within the do while loop as well, because you see here increment or decrement as per the syntax. We should follow the syntax thoroughly, then only we can execute this loop successfully. Right click, run as Java application. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Why? Because I equal to 5, 5 less than 10, 6 less than 10, 7 less than 10, 8 less than 10, 9 less than 10. Then we are able to print 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 here. And not only that, what is the difference between for while loop and do while loop? That's the next topic as well. Difference between while loop and do while loop. Let's see with an example. Suppose, let me keep while loop here. Observe carefully. When I put I is equal to 11, 11 less than 10, here it doesn't go inside because this conditional statement is not true. But here if you see, suppose I is equal to 10, I is equal to 11. We'll put the same thing here. Here I is equal to 11. Here also I is equal to 11. But 11 less than 10, it is false. But what happens in the case of do while loop is, right click, run as Java application. We get the value of I, the do while loop is 11. So what's happening here is, this block will execute first and it will check the conditional statement second. This block will execute once the conditional statement is true. So there is a lot of difference between while loop and do while loop. In the case of while loop, the conditional statement should be true, then only this entire block will execute. In the case of do while loop, this will execute once, then the conditional statement will be executed. After that, if the conditional statement is true, then it will consider and go inside the do while loop and execute it. So the difference is, in the do while loop, even if the condition is false, it executes a do while loop once. So in some scenarios where if there is a requirement where to execute the loop at least once, then go for do while loop. But the loop where once the conditional statement is true, then only if you would like to execute the loop, then go for while conditional statement. So totally we have covered multiple examples: do while loop, enhanced for loop, nested for loop. When I say terminate the loop, it means it's a break statement, break the particular loop. And while loop example, you can even break for loop, while loop, do while loop, anything you can break by putting the conditional statement. Suppose let's go to terminate the loop. Let's write one example again here. Let's try to terminate the while loop, okay, or do while loop. Any loop we can terminate. Int I is equal to 5. Say while I less than 10. So within this, I can put a conditional statement. If I equal to 7, just try to break. And we can put here I is equal to I plus 1. That's it. So what happens? This while loop will execute for specific number of times, and it will break when the conditional statement is true. So here in while loop. So like that, you can use this break statement inside any loop to break that loop and go to the next statement after this loop. Say after while loop, to understand this concept very well. Okay, so let me close others. Let's focus only on the terminate loop. Let's try to execute this program to understand this concept very well. See, after while loop. So break is very important, and also one more important point we should keep in mind is in the case of nested for loop, if you wanted to break, you have to use break and the label name to break the loop. So this is how mainly we have to use loops in real time, mainly not only in Java, and also these loops are very helpful in the case of automation tools like Selenium, where we would like to print the values from the table, we would like to read the data from the Excel. So in all these scenarios, it is important to use and learn loops. If you like my video, please please share and subscribe, and thanks for watching my video.